In my 35 years on the bench here in Providence, Rhode Island, I have learned that character is not what a person does when the whole world is watching and cheering. Character is what a person does when they think it does not matter, when no camera is pointed at them, when no medal is at stake, when they are standing in a municipal courtroom on a Monday morning over a parking ticket, and the easiest thing in the world would be to let their name open a door that other people's names cannot open. Subscribe right now, my friends, because what happened the morning Marcus Reeves walked into my courtroom is a story about greatness. And I do not mean the kind that gets you on a podium. I mean the kind that makes you a human being worth knowing. Let me take you back to a Monday in late August. Providence in late August is generous with its warmth, the kind of warmth that makes the city feel like it is at its best, unhurried and alive. I had come into the courthouse that morning feeling, as I often do, grateful. I had some health challenges a few years back that rearranged my relationship with ordinary mornings, and I will tell you honestly, I no longer take a single one of them for granted. Every morning I put on this robe as a gift. Every person who walks through that door deserves my full and complete attention. Quinn had the docket ready, and I noticed he had a particular expression when he handed me the files. Not the complex situation expression, something closer to curiosity mixed with a kind of quiet amusement. I made my mental note. Hit that like button right now if you believe that how famous you are should have absolutely no bearing on how you are treated in a court of law, because that principle is about to be put to the test in my courtroom. The docket was what I expected for a Monday. A young woman with 3 unpaid parking tickets who had clearly been hoping they would disappear on their own. They never do, I want you to know that. A retired postal worker with an expired inspection sticker who explained, with the precision of someone who had rehearsed, that he had been in the hospital for 6 weeks and had only recently been cleared to drive again. I waived his fine completely and told him to take care of himself. He thanked me with a handshake that said more than words, and then Quinn called the name Marcus Reeves. Now, I want to be clear about something. When that name was called, I did not immediately connect it to anything. I am a judge, not a sports commentator. I follow what matters to Providence. I care about this city, its people, its neighborhoods, its struggles, and its dignity. And I am aware of athletes who have come from here, who have represented this community on larger stages. But I do not keep a mental catalog of names, and I did not, in the first moment, place Marcus Reeves. What I noticed was the man himself. He was perhaps 26 years old, tall, genuinely tall, the kind of tall that a room accommodates rather than the other way around, with the particular physical quality of someone whose body had been trained with extraordinary discipline over many years. He moved with an economy of motion that athletes have, nothing wasted, nothing careless. He was wearing jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt, no logo, no display. He had the kind of face that is naturally expressive, open, alert, and what I read in it when he approached the defendant's position was something I want to describe carefully because it mattered enormously to what followed. He was not embarrassed to be here. He was not performing humility. He was not doing the thing that some people do in this courtroom when they carry a public identity, that subtle sideways communication that says, you know who I am, and surely that changes something. He was simply present, attentive, respectful in the way that does not require announcement. I looked at the file. Parking ticket, College Hill, $60, issued on a Thursday evening at 6:15 p.m., expired meter. He had been parked in front of a residential building on Benefit Street. I said, "Good morning, Mr. Reeves." "Good morning, Your Honor." His voice was steady. He looked at me directly. I appreciated that. "You're here regarding a parking violation on Benefit Street," I said. "How do you plead?" He said without hesitation. "Guilty, Your Honor." I noted that. I have said it before, and I will say it again. There is something about a clean guilty plea that tells me more about a person's character than almost anything else they can do in this building, because this courtroom has a not guilty exit, and some people sprint for it regardless of the truth. This man did not. "You want to tell me what happened?" I asked. He nodded. He said he had been visiting his grandmother, who lived in an apartment on Benefit Street. He said she had called him that afternoon sounding confused and a little frightened, and that he had driven over immediately without thinking about anything except getting to her. He said the meter situation simply had not registered until after the fact, and that when he came back down to his car, the ticket was already written. "Is your grandmother all right?" I asked. "She is now, Your Honor. She had a dizzy spell. Her blood pressure had spiked. I sat with her until her neighbor could come over and stay with her." He paused. "She's 81. She lives alone." I looked at him. I looked at the file. I looked back at him. Something in his eyes told me he was telling the truth, completely and without calculation. After 35 years, that particular form of honesty has a quality I can identify the way a musician identifies a pure note. But before I continue, and before I tell you the moment that changed everything I thought I understood about this young man and this case, subscribe to this channel right now, because the story that is about to unfold is one of those stories that the Caught in Providence audience remembers for years. I want you to be here for all of it. I said, Mr. Reeves, let me ask you something. What do you do for a living? A brief pause, not evasive, considering, as though he was deciding how to answer a question he had perhaps been asked in many different contexts and had learned to answer carefully. He said, I'm a track and field athlete, Your Honor. I nodded slowly. Track and field. What distance? 400 meters primarily, and the relay. I looked at him for a moment, and then it arrived. The connection, assembling itself from something I had half heard on the radio during my drive-in that morning, a mention of an upcoming international competition of Providence's own, and it landed. I said, You're going to Paris. He looked at me with an expression that was equal parts surprise and something more guarded. Yes, Your Honor, the games are in 3 weeks. The gallery stirred. I heard it. That sound of collective recognition rippling through the room as people made the same connection I had just made. This was not just a track athlete. This was an Olympic athlete representing the United States of America. 3 weeks from standing on the largest athletic stage on the planet, and he was standing in my courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island over a $60 parking ticket, having just pleaded guilty without a moment's hesitation. I want to tell you something, my friends. In that moment, I felt two things simultaneously, and I am going to be honest about both of them. The first was a deep and genuine admiration. The second was a deliberate and conscious decision to treat this moment exactly as I would treat it if Marcus Reeves were Marcus Reeves the bakery worker, or Marcus Reeves the school teacher, or Marcus Reeves the retired postal worker I had seen 20 minutes earlier, because the law does not have a VIP entrance. And anyone who has sat in this chair understands that the moment you start applying it differently based on who a person is rather than what they have done, you have stopped being a judge. You have become something else entirely, and it is not something I am willing to become. Hit that like button right now if you believe an Olympic medal should carry absolutely no legal weight in a court of justice, because I want you to see how Marcus Reeves himself responded to that principle. I said, Mr. Reeves, I want to acknowledge that what you did that evening, going immediately to your grandmother, staying with her, making sure she was safe, that tells me a great deal about who you are. And I want you to know I hear that. He nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Now, I said, I'm also going to tell you that I'm aware of who you are and what you're about to do in 3 weeks, and I want to be very direct with you about something. I paused deliberately. That doesn't change how I handle this case, you understand that? He looked at me steadily. Yes, Your Honor, I wouldn't want it to. Those 6 words, I wouldn't want it to. I want to stay with those words for just a moment, because they are the most important thing that was said in my courtroom that Monday morning, and possibly the most important thing I have heard from an athlete of his caliber in 3.5 decades on this bench. He did not say them with false modesty. He did not say them strategically. He said them the way a person states a fact about themselves that they have long since stopped needing to argue, because they simply live it. I looked at Quinn. Quinn gave me a single slow nod, the kind that means, yes, Judge, exactly what you're thinking. I looked at Carlos, my prosecutor, who was leaning back slightly in his chair with the expression of a man watching something he had not expected and was quietly grateful to witness. But then Marcus Reeves told me something I did not expect. He said, Your Honor, may I add something? Go ahead, I said. He reached into the front pocket of his sweatshirt and produced a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. He said, I wrote down the details of the evening because I wanted to be accurate if you asked. But there's something else on here I'd like to mention, with your permission. Go ahead, I said again. He looked at the paper, and then he looked up at me, and he said, Your Honor, my grandmother came to this country from Jamaica in 1971. She worked as a home health aide for 31 years. She raised 3 children by herself after my grandfather passed. She never owned a car. She used public transportation every single day of her working life. He paused. She's the reason I run, not for the medals, because of her. She used to say that the only thing no one can take from you is how hard you work. He folded the paper. I just thought you should know the whole story. I had to pause for a moment. I thought of my own father, Salvatore Caprio, who crossed an ocean so that his children could stand on higher ground, who worked with his hands and his back and his pride and never once asked for recognition, who taught me, without ever sitting me down and saying the words, that the measure of a person is not what they achieve, but who they remain while achieving it. This young man, 3 weeks from the Olympic Games, standing in my courtroom, had just told me that his grandmother An 81-year-old Jamaican woman who rode buses her whole life and raised children alone and never stopped working was his reason. Not the finish line, not the podium. Her. My throat tightened. Before I tell you what I decided, and before I tell you the extraordinary thing that happened after my ruling that none of us in this room anticipated, share this video right now with someone in your life who needs to be reminded that greatness and humility are not opposites. They are the same thing, wearing different clothes. I looked at the file one final time. $60, expired meter, Benefit Street, Thursday evening at 6:15. A man who ran to his grandmother first and worried about the parking meter second. I said, "Mr. Reeves." "Yes, Your Honor. I'm going to find you not responsible for this violation." I heard the gallery respond, warmly, immediately. I continued, because I wanted the reasoning on the record. An immediate family emergency that requires your direct presence constitutes a compelling mitigating circumstance. You responded to a medical situation involving an elderly family member living alone. You stayed until she was safe. The violation, while real, occurred in the direct service of her well-being. I paused. Case dismissed. Fine waived. He said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Simply, directly, no performance. But here is what I have not told you yet. Here is the moment that completed this story in a way I could not have scripted. I said, "Mr. Reeves, before you go, I have one more question for you and you don't have to answer it." He waited. "Your grandmother, is she going to be able to watch you compete?" Something moved through his face, something private and very deep. He said, "She can't travel, Your Honor. She watches on television. We video call before every race." I nodded slowly. I thought about what it means to carry someone with you, not in a bag, not in a photograph, but in the actual fiber of why you do what you do. I thought about every person in every seat in that gallery who had their own version of that, their own person who could not be there, who watched from a distance, who they ran toward or worked toward or lived toward every day. I said, "Tell her Providence is proud of both of you." Marcus Reeves looked at me for a moment that was longer than a moment, and then he said in a voice that had gone quieter than everything else he had said that morning, "I will, Your Honor, I will." He turned to leave, and then, I did not plan this, I want to be clear about that. It was not a performance for the cameras, it was simply what the moment called for. I said, "Mr. Reeves." He turned back. "Run fast," I said. The gallery laughed. Not mockingly, warmly, the way laughter sounds when it rises from something genuine. Marcus Reeves smiled. A real smile, wide and unguarded, the smile of a man who had come into a courtroom expecting procedure and was leaving with something he had not anticipated. Quinn was smiling. Carlos was smiling. I may have been smiling myself, though I maintain appropriate judicial dignity at all times, and I will neither confirm nor deny. Leave me a comment right now telling me what you would have done if you had been sitting on this bench that morning. And subscribe if you haven't already, because I want you here for every story this courtroom has to tell. I learned afterward, through the Caught in Providence team and through the remarkable network of human connection that this show has built over the years, that Marcus Reeves did indeed go to Paris. I watched part of the 400-meter relay on a small television in my office between afternoon sessions, with Quinn standing in the doorway pretending he had a reason to be there other than watching. Marcus ran the anchor leg. He ran it with the particular quality that I had noticed when he walked into my courtroom. Economical, purposeful, nothing wasted. His team finished with a medal. I will not tell you which color, because what matters to this story is not the color. What matters is that somewhere in Jamaica, an 81-year-old woman who had ridden buses her whole life and worked 31 years as a home health aide and raised 3 children alone and told her grandson that the only thing no one can take from you is how hard you work. That woman watched her grandson on a television screen and saw the answer to everything she had given him. I received a photograph in the mail 6 weeks after that Monday morning. It was Marcus Reeves and his grandmother. She was seated. He was beside her, both of them looking at the camera with the particular expression of people who know they have something worth having. On the back, in handwriting that was careful and deliberate, he had written, "She says, 'Thank you, Judge.' So do I." That photograph is in my office, next to Daniel's crayon drawing, if you have been following these stories. Let me tell you what Marcus Reeves taught me, or reminded me, because the best lessons are always reminders of things we already know but need to hear again. He reminded me that true character has no audience. It does not perform for recognition. It does not leverage its accomplishments for advantage. It simply is what it is, consistently, in courtrooms and on tracks and in apartments on Benefit Street where an 81-year-old grandmother needs someone to come. I have been doing this for 35 years. I have seen people use every possible asset they possess to try to navigate their way to a different outcome in my courtroom. Fame, money, connections, charm, tears, indignation. I have seen every version of the human effort to be treated as an exception. Marcus Reeves walked in and asked for nothing except to be treated like everyone else. And in doing so, he distinguished himself from almost everyone I have ever seen stand in that spot. That is the paradox of genuine humility. The moment you stop trying to be exceptional, you become it. My father understood that. He never once asked this country to treat him as special. He asked only for the chance to work hard and be judged fairly. And from that simple, profound request, he built something that his children and grandchildren stand on to this day. Marcus Reeves's grandmother understood the same thing. She rode the bus. She worked. She told her grandson what could not be taken from him, and 30 years later, he carried that truth into an Olympic final and a Providence courtroom on the same summer morning, and in both places it held. I try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated. Every person who stands before me gets that. The struggling mother, the grieving widow, the 9-year-old boy, the Olympic athlete, every single one of them gets my full attention, my honest assessment, and my genuine care. Not because it makes me a good judge, though I hope it does, but because it is the only way I know how to honor the people who built the ground I stand on. God bless you, Marcus. God bless your grandmother. God bless every athlete who carries someone with them when they compete, someone who cannot be in the stadium, who watches from a distance, who is the reason and the root of everything. And God bless all of you, my friends, watching this from wherever you are. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the most impressive thing about truly great people is almost never the trophy. It is who they are when no one is looking. Subscribe. Leave me your thoughts below. Tell me what this story stirred in you. And tell me honestly, when have you been surprised by the character of someone you thought you had already figured out? Because in this courtroom, that surprise happens every single week. And nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for who walked through my door the very next morning.